3 months ago, I was foolish enough to believe in fairy tales. Then, my fiancé, Axel, shattered my world into a million pieces at our engagement party. He didn't just break my heart. He publicly humiliated me. But what he didn't realize was that he wasn't ending my story. He was just giving me a reason to rewrite it. At 26, my imagination still lived in a world painted with the brushstrokes of Disney and happily ever afters. I was Veronica Leo. An earnest, perhaps overly trusting, young woman who believed in soulmates, grand gestures, and the kind of love that conquered all. For 5 blissful years, Axel Landon had been the prince in my personal epic. He was charming, ambitious, and handsome in a way that made heads turn. A fact I was always keenly aware of, and secretly proud of. We met in college. A whirlwind romance that quickly settled into a comfortable routine. And I believed, a solid foundation for a lifetime. Every birthday, every anniversary, every shared quiet evening on the sofa, added another brick to the castle of our future. A future I envisioned in perfect detail. A cozy home, 2 children, and laughter echoing through the years. I even had a Pinterest board for our dream wedding, complete with rustic chic decor and fairy lights, all inspired by the belief that our love was as timeless as a classic romance novel. The night of our engagement party, the air itself seemed to shimmer with my anticipation. It was held at O'Malley, a trendy bar downtown that Axel frequented with his friends. The venue buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the warm hum of excited chatter. I'd spent weeks agonizing over my dress, finally settling on a simple yet elegant navy blue number that Axel had said looked nice enough. I remember standing before the mirror, twirling slightly, a giddy smile on my face. This was it, the official announcement, the moment we would share our commitment with the world, surrounded by our dearest friends and family. My best friend Maya had practically bubbled over with excitement, helping me with my hair and makeup, assuring me I looked radiant. I felt it too. Radiant with hope, with love, with the sheer certainty that my life was unfolding exactly as it should. Axel had insisted on making a small speech to officially announce our engagement. My heart pounded a joyful rhythm against my ribs as I watched him step onto the small raised platform. He looked effortlessly dashing in his charcoal suit, a confident smirk playing on his lips. He raised a hand, calling for silence, and the crowd gradually quieted, all eyes turning to him. My gaze locked with his. A silent promise exchanged across the room. I felt a blush creep up my neck, anticipating his loving words, his tender declaration. "Good evening, everyone," Axel began, his voice smooth and clear. "Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate, well, to celebrate a milestone in my life." My smile widened, but then, a flicker of something in his eyes. Not the warmth I expected, but a strange, almost calculating glint. He paused, sweeping his gaze across the room, lingering on me for a moment too long, then shifting away. My heart began a slower, more hesitant beat. "As you know," he continued, "Veronica and I have been together for 5 years. 5 long years." He chuckled, and a few people in the crowd joined in, but the sound felt hollow to my ears. And tonight, we were supposed to be announcing our engagement. A collective gasp, then a ripple of excited murmurs went through the room. I took a small step forward, ready to join him, ready to bask in the glow of our shared moment. Then, he dropped the bomb. "But the truth is," Axel said, his voice now devoid of any warmth, a cold, clinical edge slicing through the festive atmosphere, "I'm just not sure I can go through with it. I mean, look at her. Veronica, you've let yourself go, haven't you? You're not the girl I fell in love with. The sparkle's gone. The time's appeal asterisk." He gestured vaguely at me, as if I were a distasteful object. "Marriage is a serious commitment. And frankly, I deserve someone who takes care of herself. Someone who inspires me." The words hung in the air, sharp and poisonous, each one a dagger twisting in my chest. The cheers and laughter died, replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. I saw Easton Mott and Miles Jasper, Axel's closest friends, exchange uncomfortable glances. Juanita Landon, Axel's mother, looked aghast, her hand flying to her mouth. Carmen, his sister, stared at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. And me? I stood frozen, my radiant smile shattered, my heart not just broken, but pulverized into a million jagged fragments. The fairy tale hadn't just crumbled. It had been detonated, leaving nothing but dust and the bitter taste of public humiliation in its wake. My legs gave out. One moment, I was standing, bathed in the harsh spotlight of Axel's cruel gaze. And the next, the floor of O'Malley rushed up to meet me. The celebratory buzz of the bar twisted into a cacophony of gasps and whispers. But all I heard was the echoing void in my own chest. A disembodied hand, soft yet firm, helped me regain my footing, but I barely registered it. My vision narrowed, focusing only on the retreating figure of Axel, his confident smirk still etched on his face as he walked away, leaving me to drown in the silence he had created. His words echoed, a venomous chorus, each syllable a fresh wound. You've let yourself go. The sparkle's gone. I deserve someone who inspires me. Worthless. Ugly. Undeserving. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, settled deep in my bones, hardening into a block of ice that replaced my heart. I don't remember leaving O'Malley. The next few hours, perhaps even days, exist only as fractured images. The concerned, bewildered faces of Maya, Juanita, and Carmen. The suffocating intimacy of a taxi ride. The sudden, jarring silence of my own apartment. My sanctuary, once filled with the warmth of shared memories and future dreams, now felt like a desolate prison. I drew the curtains, plunging my world into a perpetual twilight, a futile attempt to hide from the judgment I imagined lurking behind every window pane, in every passing car. The phone, a once constant companion, lay abandoned, its insistent chirps and vibrations going unanswered. I couldn't bear the thought of another voice, another question, another flicker of pity in someone's eyes. Shame, thick and acrid, clung to me like a second skin, poisoning every thought, every breath. Days blurred into weeks. Sleep offered no escape, only restless, fragmented dreams, where Axel's scornful face loomed large. Food tasted like ash, the vibrant colors of life muted to a dull, monochrome existence. Alone in the quiet despair of my apartment, my mind, like a sadistic tormentor, replayed every moment of our 5 years together. Sifting through the wreckage for clues, for warnings I had been too naive, too deeply in love, to see. And then, the red flags began to unfurl, one by one, chillingly clear in the harsh light of betrayal. He'd always had a way of making me feel less than, even when he claimed to love me most. His compliments were often tinged with caveats. You look great, asterisk, but maybe a different hairstyle next time, asterisk. Or, you're so smart, asterisk for a woman, asterisk. He'd make jokes about my weight or my career ambitions, subtly discouraging me from pursuing certain passions, always framing it as, for my own good. You don't need to work so hard, Vero, he'd say, stroking my hair. I'll take care of you, just focus on us. He'd chip away at my confidence, then rush in with affection, a grand gesture, making me feel utterly dependent on his validation, on his times love, to feel whole. He was the sun, and I, a desperate little moon, merely reflected his light. I'd excused it all as just Axel being Axel, a charming flaw in an otherwise perfect man. I was so busy trying to be his ideal woman that I'd forgotten who Veronica Leo was entirely. The initial shock slowly morphed into a simmering resentment, a burning ember deep within me. Grief, a suffocating blanket, was interwoven with spikes of incandescent rage. I would replay the scene at O'Malley countless times, searching for a way I could have prevented it. A different dress, a different word, a different times me asterisk. But there was no escape. The dreams of our future, a cozy home, 2 children, laughter echoing through the years shattered into painful shards, each one piercing me anew. I felt stuck, trapped in the wreckage, paralyzed by the sheer weight of what had been lost. How could I possibly move forward when I didn't even know what I was anymore? The Veronica Axel had loved, the naive girl who believed in fairy tales, was dead. But who was left? The question echoed in the desolate chambers of my mind. Asterisk, who was left? Asterisk. For weeks, there was no answer, just a crushing silence, a hollow void where my identity once resided. But then, one suffocating afternoon, as I lay cocooned in the stale air of my apartment, the faint scent of old perfume and forgotten dreams clinging to my skin, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a sudden burst of anger or a brilliant epiphany, but a quiet, insidious irritation. I was tired. Tired of the tears, tired of the numbness, tired of being defined by Axel's cruelty. I pushed myself up, my limbs heavy and uncooperative, and stumbled towards the bathroom. The reflection staring back at me from the fogged mirror was a stranger. Sunken eyes, tangled hair, a pale, defeated face I barely recognized. This wasn't Veronica. This was a ghost, a victim, and in that moment a ferocious primal rejection surged through me. Asterisk, no, this is not my ending. Asterisk, a fierce, unwavering resolve solidified in my chest. It wasn't for Axel. It wasn't to win him back or prove him wrong in his time's eyes. This was for times me asterisk, for the woman I was meant to be, stripped bare of fairy tales and false promises. This was about reclaiming Veronica Leo, not as the girl Axel had left behind, but as the woman she was becoming. I would rewrite my story. Not with bitterness as my pen, but with strength and self-worth as my ink. The journey began with the simplest, most agonizing steps. The first was to step out of the twilight prison of my apartment. The sun felt harsh, the city noises deafening. My first trip to the grocery store was an ordeal. Every glance felt like a judgment, every murmur a whispered condemnation. But I pushed through. Then came the gym. I'd always viewed exercise as a chore, a means to an end. Now, it became a sanctuary, a battlefield where I fought for myself. My initial sessions were humiliating, my muscles screamed, my lungs burned, and I felt clumsy and weak. There were days I wanted to quit, to curl back into the comfortable despair of my sofa, but each bead of sweat felt like a tear cleansed. Each aching muscle a testament to my burgeoning resilience. I learned to love the burn, the feeling of pushing my limits, the quiet satisfaction of seeing myself grow stronger, one painful rep at a time. It wasn't just physical. It was a mental cleansing, a way to channel the anger and grief into something productive. Alongside my physical transformation, I embarked on a deeper, more internal journey. I found a therapist, Dr. Evans, a kind but firm woman who helped me unpack the layers of emotional damage. We talked about gaslighting, about the insidious ways Axel had eroded my self-esteem, about my own naivety and how it had made me vulnerable. Therapy wasn't easy. It forced me to confront painful truths and shed the last vestiges of my victimhood. I also started meditating, finding quiet moments amidst the chaos of my thoughts to ground myself, to breathe, to simply be asterisk. These practices were like chisels, slowly but surely carving away the debris Axel had left behind, revealing the core of who I truly was. Professionally, I threw myself into my work as a PR manager with a ferocity I hadn't known I possessed. I took on challenging new accounts, volunteered for high-stakes projects, and stayed late, immersing myself in strategy and creativity. My previous job, once just a means to an end, became a passion, a testament to my intellect and capabilities. Each successful campaign, each positive client feedback, was a small victory, a building block in the foundation of my new identity. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The initial, hesitant steps had become strides, and with every passing day, The faint outline of the woman I was meant to be grew clearer, stronger, and undeniably her own. The subtle shifts I'd painstakingly cultivated within soon began to manifest outwardly. First as a faint glow, then as an undeniable radiance. It wasn't a superficial makeover, but an authentic emergence. My posture straightened not just from countless hours at the gym, but from a newfound inner fortitude. My eyes, once clouded with doubt, now held a sharp, unwavering clarity. I still chose elegant, understated clothes, but they were no longer a disguise. They were an extension of a woman who knew her worth. People noticed. Colleagues who had once offered gentle commiseration now regarded me with a blend of admiration and curiosity. There was a quiet confidence in my stride, a poised assurance in my voice, and a commanding presence that filled any room I entered, not with arrogance, but with a palpable sense of purpose. At my PR firm, I wasn't just a manager anymore. I was a force. The energy I once poured into a failing relationship, I now channeled into crafting brilliant campaigns. I spearheaded projects that were deemed too ambitious or too risky, consistently turning them into resounding successes. One campaign, for a struggling tech startup, not only put them on the map but garnered industry awards, propelling my own reputation into the upper echelons of the firm. My calendar was a testament to my ascent. Back-to-back client meetings, strategic planning sessions, and invitations to exclusive industry events. I found an exhilarating satisfaction in deciphering market trends, in weaving compelling narratives, in seeing my strategies come to fruition. My name, Veronica Leo, became synonymous with innovation, reliability, and an almost uncanny ability to deliver results. It wasn't just about escaping a past identity. It was about building an empire, brick by meticulously placed brick, forged from my own intellect and unwavering dedication. This external validation, however, was merely a mirror reflecting a far more profound internal shift. The girl who once defined her entire existence by another's affection was gone, replaced by a woman whose self-assurance was an unshakable bedrock. Dr. Evans had helped me understand that true value wasn't something granted by a partner, but an inherent quality, polished and revealed through self-discovery. I learned to identify my needs, voice my opinions without apology, and most importantly, set unyielding boundaries. The fear of being disliked or rejected, a ghost that had haunted me for years, had finally dissipated. I understood that my peace, my self-respect, was non-negotiable. If someone couldn't meet me on that ground, they simply didn't belong in my life. Sometimes, late at night, I would catch a glimpse of my reflection, perhaps in a darkened window or a polished surface, and a phantom image of the old Veronica would flicker. The wide-eyed girl, eager to please, cloaked in an invisible shroud of insecurity, desperate for a prince to complete her fairy tale. Then, the vision would recede, and the woman staring back would reclaim her space, sharp, resilient, and radiating an inner light that was entirely her own. Axel had wanted to dim my sparkle, to convince me I was unworthy. He hadn't just failed. He had inadvertently ignited a supernova. The contrast was stark, almost painful in its clarity. The naive dreamer had been obliterated, and from her ashes, a phoenix had truly risen. I was no longer waiting for a happy ending. I was writing it, one powerful, purposeful word at a time. The vibrant future I was meticulously crafting for myself was exhilarating, a testament to my resilience. Yet, an unfinished chord still vibrated in my soul, a dissonant echo of the past. It wasn't anger or bitterness that fueled it. Not anymore. Those raw, corrosive emotions had been painstakingly processed and purged through therapy and self-discovery. What remained was a profound, quiet conviction that the truth, like a persistent weed, would eventually push through concrete. Axel had shattered my world with lies and public cruelty. Now, it was time for his own carefully constructed facade to crumble, not by my hand, but by the weight of his authentic self. My plan wasn't about vengeance in the traditional sense. No fiery retribution or public scandal orchestrated by me. That would be too messy, too undignified, and ultimately, too much like Axel himself. Instead, it was a strategy of exposure, a meticulous undoing. I would simply provide the stage, the lighting, and the opportune cues for Axel to reveal the true depth of his narcissism, his manipulativeness, and his utter disregard for anyone but himself. My goal was for him to self-destruct. Not because I pushed him off a cliff, but because he'd built his entire world on quicksand, and I was merely going to point out the fault lines. I approached this undertaking with the same meticulous precision I applied to my most complex PR campaigns. Every detail, every potential variable, was considered. I created a mental chessboard, each square representing an interaction, each piece a person in Axel's orbit. His friends, Easton and Miles, were crucial. They were his inner circle, his echo chamber. His mother, Juanita, and his sister Carmen represented his family and reputation, the people whose good opinion he relied upon most. Public settings would be the arenas, carefully chosen to maximize impact without ever making me look like the aggressor. The brilliance of it, I realized, was its simplicity. I wouldn't need to lie, to spread rumors, or to confront him directly with accusations. I would simply allow his own words and actions, once given the right context, to speak for themselves. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst of rage. It was a cold, calculated game of psychological chess. I anticipated Axel's every move, his predictable pattern of charming deflection, aggrieved victimhood, and aggressive manipulation. I knew he would try to re-enter my life, driven by ego and a sense of entitlement. I knew he would seek to reclaim what he perceived as his, particularly now that his Veronica had become someone far more impressive. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that he would fail. My role was merely to ensure that each of his failures was witnessed, each of his false notes heard, by the very people whose admiration he craved. The ethical considerations were surprisingly minimal. I wasn't harming him, physically or professionally, through direct action. I wasn't fabricating evidence or destroying his livelihood. I was simply refusing to protect him from the consequences of his own character. If anything, I was offering a delayed form of justice. Not just for myself, but for anyone else he had undoubtedly treated, or would treat, with similar disdain. My journal, filled not with laments but with strategic bullet points and potential scenarios, became my only confidant. It was a space to articulate the precise phrasing for a cutting remark delivered with a polite smile, the exact timing for a subtle revelation, the delicate balance between appearing indifferent and undeniably impactful. This was a narrative I was controlling, a story I was shaping, not just for my own closure, but to ensure that the fairy tale Axel clung to, the one where he was the unblemished hero, finally got its true, unglamorous ending. The new Veronica wasn't just surviving, she was orchestrating, with surgical precision, the unveiling of a truth long overdue. The grand ballroom of the Hilton, awash in the soft glow of crystal chandeliers and the murmuring symphony of high society, was precisely the stage I had envisioned. The air hummed with the clinking of champagne flutes, the rustle of silk, and the carefully modulated laughter of the city's elite, gathered for the annual Hope for Tomorrow charity gala. Every detail, from the towering floral arrangements to the meticulously plated hors d'oeuvres, spoke of opulence and influence, the perfect backdrop for my meticulously orchestrated re-entrance. Tonight, I wasn't just attending, I was performing. I moved through the throng, not with the timid uncertainty of the old Veronica, but with a poised grace that felt utterly natural. My gown, a sleek emerald green number that shimmered with every step, hugged my new contours with understated confidence. My hair, styled in soft cascading waves, framed a face that was both familiar and startlingly new. My eyes, enhanced by a subtle smoky shadow, held a quiet intensity, a reflection of the unshakable resolve I now carried within. It wasn't about being noticed, it was about being unforgettable. about leaving an impression that resonated with purpose, not desperation. As I accepted a glass of Prosecco from a passing waiter, my gaze swept across the room, anticipating the inevitable. And there he was, Axel. He stood by the bar, surrounded by a small group of acquaintances, including Easton Mott and Miles Jasper, his ever-present satellites. His back was to me, but as I drew closer, conversing with a senior partner from a rival firm, I saw Easton's eyes widen, then Miles's. Their conversations stuttered, their gazes fixed on something, or rather, someone behind Axel. A slow, knowing smile touched my lips. The moment was nigh. Axel, sensing the shift in their attention, slowly turned. His confident, almost arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated shock. His jaw went slack. His eyes, once so dismissive, now darted across my transformed figure, lingering on my face as if searching for a phantom from the past. A mix of emotions flashed across his features. Disbelief, then a flicker of regret, quickly followed by something disturbingly familiar: possessiveness. It was the look of a man who suddenly realized he'd discarded a treasure, and now, seeing it gleam brighter than ever, believed it still belonged to him. The thought brought a cold satisfaction. He started to take a step, his hand unconsciously reaching out, but I held his gaze. A subtle, almost imperceptible shake of my head, conveying a silent, unyielding boundary. Veronica? His voice, when it finally came, was a mere whisper, laced with a bewildered awe I hadn't heard in years. Is that you? I offered him a small, polite smile, the kind I reserved for distant acquaintances at corporate events. My voice was calm, steady, devoid of any emotional tremor. Axel, good evening. I didn't expect to see you here. Easton and Miles, now fully aware of the tension, shifted uncomfortably. They exchanged furtive glances, their expressions a mix of confusion and dawning realization. They had witnessed his public humiliation of me. Now they were witnessing my metamorphosis, and his stunned reaction. The contrast was stark, the implication clear. He had been wrong. Axel, recovering slightly, pushed past his friends, a desperate eagerness in his eyes. You look incredible. Truly. I hardly recognized you. He tried to project charm, but it was tainted with a forced desperation, a fragile attempt to regain some semblance of control. We should talk. Catch up. It's been too long. My smile remained, unwavering, impenetrable. There's nothing to catch up on, Axel, and frankly, I'm quite busy tonight. I gestured subtly to my conversation partner, who nodded politely in agreement, sensing the awkwardness. It was good seeing you. With that, I turned, smoothly re-engaging in my previous conversation, leaving Axel stranded, his hand still half extended, his face a mask of confusion and growing frustration. I felt his eyes burning into my back, but their heat no longer reached me. The power dynamics had irrevocably shifted. The seed was planted. The mutual acquaintances around us, privy to the exchange, now had a new narrative to ponder. A silent question forming in their minds. What really happened between Veronica and Axel? This wasn't about vengeance, not anymore. This was about clarifying the truth, one elegant, unyielding gesture at a time. And the gala was just the beginning. The elegant glow of the gala had faded, replaced by the mundane hum of fluorescent lights in the organic produce aisle. My weekly grocery run was a quiet ritual, a brief respite from the demanding pace of my transformed life. I picked out a vibrant bunch of kale, enjoying the simple act of choosing fresh ingredients, a stark contrast to the carefully curated image I presented to the world. A subtle shift in the air, a shadow falling over my cart, alerted me before I even saw him. The scent of a familiar, expensive cologne wafted closer, and I felt a prickle of annoyance rather than surprise. Veronica, Axel's voice, smooth and laced with an almost theatrical concern, echoed softly between the shelves of exotic fruits. I turned, a perfectly neutral expression on my face. He stood there, looking impeccably casual in a designer tracksuit. A half-empty basket dangling from his hand. His eyes, though, were anything but casual. They held a desperate, calculating glint. I knew all too well. "Axel," I replied, my voice calm, betraying nothing. What a coincidence. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. Coincidence? I wouldn't say that. I saw you leave your apartment. I really needed to talk to you. His gaze swept over me, a possessive appraisal that made my skin crawl. You really have changed. You look incredible. Like a different woman. I arched an eyebrow. Is that a compliment, Axel, or an observation that I no longer fit your narrow definition of acceptable? I loaded my kale onto the conveyor belt, making sure my back was partially turned to him. Asserting my disinterest without a word, he flinched, then quickly recovered, putting on his most charmingly apologetic face. No, Veronica. I'm trying to apologize. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the gala. Since everything. I was an idiot, a complete fool. I don't know what got into me that night. The pressure, the stress of work. I lashed out. It was never about you. He gestured vaguely, as if the past 5 years could be dismissed with a wave of his hand. You know how much I love you. Always have. We belong together, Vero. We had a future. A laugh, low and dry, escaped my lips. Lashed out, Axel? You mean you times revealed times yourself? There was no pressure, no stress. That night, that wasn't of your own making. You didn't lash out? You consciously chose to humiliate me publicly, dismantling our 5 years together piece by piece. All because I supposedly let myself go and didn't inspire you? Are you truly trying to convince me it was about anything times other times than your profound narcissism? My voice remained even, unwavering, a stark contrast to the venom of his past words. And as for us belonging together, that fairy tale ended the moment you decided I wasn't worthy of you. You set me free, Axel. And believe me, I'm eternally grateful. My items were scanning, the repetitive beeps punctuated by the stunned silence that had fallen around us. Other shoppers, initially oblivious, had begun to slow their carts, their eyes darting between us, drawn by the unusual intensity of our exchange. An older woman with a basket of organic produce clutched it tighter, her gaze sharp, understanding. A young couple stopped, openly staring, their popcorn bag forgotten. Axel, acutely aware of the growing audience, shifted uncomfortably, his face reddening. His carefully constructed charm was crumbling under the weight of my blunt honesty. "Veronica, please," he whispered, lowering his voice, a desperate edge creeping in. "Don't do this. Not here. We can talk about this properly, away from everyone." He glanced around nervously, his bravado rapidly deflating. "I want to make things right. I miss you. I miss times us asterisk." I paid for my groceries, ignoring his plea, my movements precise and deliberate. "Axel, there is no us to miss. There is no right to make. What you did was unforgivable, and more importantly, it was a profound act of disrespect for the person I was. That person is gone. The woman standing before you now has no interest in revisiting the past with someone who so clearly showed his true colors." I picked up my reusable bags, meeting his gaze directly. "Consider this a public service announcement, Axel. Some things, once broken, cannot be mended. And some people, once freed, never look back." With a final, dismissive glance, I turned, pushing my cart past the gawking shoppers, leaving Axel standing frozen in the middle of the aisle, his face a mask of mortification and simmering rage. The silent validation from the surrounding faces, the subtle nods, the knowing glances. They were more potent than any shouted triumph. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't lost my composure, and yet, I had decisively, irrevocably, severed the last thread that bound us. The old Veronica might have cried, might have tried to explain. This new Veronica simply walked away, lighter, stronger, leaving him to grapple with the bitter taste of his own exposed desperation. Each step away from him felt like a powerful stride towards a future entirely of my own making. The satisfying sting of the supermarket encounter lingered. A tiny victory in a much larger, more intricate game. Public humiliation was a potent catalyst, true. But my strategy extended far beyond mere spectacle. Axel's world was held together by threads of reputation and familial obligation, and it was those threads I now sought to gently, subtly, fray. My targets? Juanita Landon, Axel's formidable mother, and Carmen, his quietly observant younger sister. I wouldn't need to wield a knife. A delicate, well-placed word, a knowing silence, would be far more effective. My first opportunity arrived a week later, a polite text from Juanita inviting me for coffee. "Just to check in, dear," she'd written. Her usual warmth tinged with a delicate uncertainty. She'd always been kind to me. A woman of traditional values who, despite her son's flaws, genuinely believed in family harmony. We met at a quaint little cafe, far from the prying eyes of O'Malley or the supermarket aisles. She looked weary. The usual sparkle in her eyes dimmed. "Veronica, I was so sorry about everything," she began, her voice low. "Axel has been so difficult lately. He said you were trying to cause trouble." I met her gaze with a soft, empathetic smile. "Juanita, I would never wish trouble upon anyone, least of all your family. My intention has always been to live my life with integrity. As for Axel, I truly hope he finds the peace and clarity he needs. It's just a shame he often struggles to see beyond his own immediate needs." I paused, letting the implication hang, then added, "It's difficult when someone you care about consistently puts their own pride above the feelings of others, isn't it? I'm sure you've experienced similar things with him growing, particularly when he was younger." I gave her a look that suggested a shared, unspoken understanding of Axel's complex personality, careful not to accuse, but merely to suggest times a pattern. Juanita's eyes flickered. A flicker of recognition, perhaps, of past grievances she had long rationalized away. She sighed, nodding slowly. "He always was strong-willed." I left the conversation there, offering no further explanation, just a gentle squeeze of her hand and a promise to call. The seed was planted. Carmen, on the other hand, was easier to connect with. She'd always been the rebel, quietly chafing under Axel's self-appointed authority. I bumped into her by chance at an art gallery opening, an event I knew she frequented. She brightened when she saw me, her initial awkwardness quickly dissolving. "Veronica! Wow, you look amazing," she exclaimed, genuine admiration in her voice. "I heard about the supermarket." Axel was furious. "He said you ambushed him." I chuckled, a light, dismissive sound. "Ambushed? Carmen, I was buying organic kale." I believe Axel was trying to stage a dramatic reconciliation. He certainly has a flair for the theatrical, doesn't he? I paused, turning my attention to a piece of abstract art. It's funny, isn't it? How some people are so convinced of their own narrative, they can't fathom anyone else having a different perspective, even when their actions speak for themselves. I glanced at her, a knowing glint in my eye. "I guess it just comes down to what you're willing to believe. Or perhaps, what you're finally willing to see asterisk." Carmen's brow furrowed, a thoughtful expression replacing her usual vivacity. She knew Axel's theatrical side better than anyone. She'd probably been the audience for countless private performances. My words, delivered with a casual air, resonated with her own experiences, encouraging her to reinterpret Axel's past behaviors, not through his lens, but through a more objective one. Over the following weeks, I observed the subtle shifts. Juanita called me again, not for coffee, but to lament Axel's latest outburst during a family dinner. "He just doesn't listen, Veronica," she'd confided, sounding genuinely distressed. "He gets so angry when anyone suggests he might be wrong. It's always someone else's fault." My earlier words about his pride and inability to see beyond his own needs echoed in her mind. I was sure. Carmen began sending me memes, sometimes with cryptic captions that subtly mocked male arrogance or self-delusion. A clear sign she was connecting my subtle remarks to her own frustrations with her brother. Axel, meanwhile, was undoubtedly feeling the tectonic plates shifting beneath his feet. He became increasingly agitated, contacting me with a frantic urgency that bespoke desperation rather than genuine remorse. His family, once his unwavering support system, was now asking questions, gently at first. Then with increasing persistence, he'd tried to dismiss their concerns, to charm them, to gaslight them. But my quiet interventions had armed them with an alternative narrative, a lens through which his usual excuses now appeared transparent. I could almost picture him, pacing his apartment, growing steadily more paranoid. He knew I was the catalyst, the invisible hand stirring the pot, yet he couldn't accuse me directly. I hadn't slandered him, hadn't spread rumors. I had simply, and elegantly, given his own family permission to question. The delicious irony wasn't lost on me. He was beginning to unravel. Not from my direct attack, but from the slow, agonizing process of his own reflection being held up, unvarnished and unforgiving, by the very people he sought to control. The incessant buzzing of my phone, displaying Axel's increasingly frantic caller ID, was the soundtrack to his downfall. Each unanswered call, each ignored text alternately cajoling, accusatory, then pleading was a testament to the fact that the subtle seeds I'd planted were bearing bitter fruit. He tried to contact me, of course, a desperate attempt to regain control of a narrative that was quickly slipping from his grasp. But I remained a phantom, a silent, unyielding wall against his increasingly erratic assaults on my voicemail. His once impeccable reputation, meticulously built on charm and calculated influence, began to fray at the edges. Rumors, subtle at first, then more pronounced, started to trickle back to me through mutual acquaintances. Easton and Miles, his loyal lieutenants, were growing visibly uncomfortable in his presence. I heard snippets of conversations. Axel's increasingly volatile temper, his tendency to blame everyone but himself for his predicament. He's just not himself. I overheard Miles tell someone at a networking event, a note of genuine sadness in his voice. He's spiraling. The unspoken implication was clear. Axel was becoming a liability, too toxic to be associated with. Their friendship, once seemingly unbreakable, was slowly dissolving under the weight of his unraveling personality. Professionally, the cracks began to show as well. My PR contacts, ever keen on industry gossip, would occasionally drop hints, a missed deadline here, a client complaint there, a difficult meeting where Axel reportedly lost his composure. His decision-making became impulsive, driven by anger, and a desperate need to prove his worth, rather than sound judgment. I even heard through the grapevine that a major project he was spearheading had hit a significant roadblock, largely due to his refusal to compromise or listen to feedback. His carefully constructed empire, built on the shifting sands of superficial charm, was beginning to crumble under the pressure of his own self-destructive tendencies. The most satisfying aspect, however, was witnessing the mounting pressure from his own family. Juanita's polite, concerned calls to me transformed into increasingly distressed accounts of arguments at home. "He screamed at Carmen for suggesting he apologized to you, Veronica," she once confided, her voice thin with worry. "He said we were all against him, that you'd poisoned our minds." Carmen, now fully enlightened, no longer offered subtle memes but sent me screenshots of their heated family group chats, Axel's aggressive, defensive replies, painting a stark picture of his paranoia and refusal to accept responsibility. The illusion of the perfect son, the flawless brother, had shattered completely for them. They had loved him, supported him, but now, faced with his raw, unvarnished narcissism, they were beginning to retreat, wounded and disillusioned. Their loyalty, once absolute, was cracking under the strain of his increasingly erratic behavior, and his inability to see their genuine concern as anything but an attack. I watched from a comfortable distance, no longer with bitterness, but with a quiet, almost clinical satisfaction. My plan was unfolding exactly as conceived, with an efficiency that was both chilling and profoundly just. I hadn't lifted a finger to actively destroy him. I had simply removed the veil, allowed the light to expose the rot beneath, and then stepped back to watch him do the rest. He was not a victim of my machinations. He was the architect of his own ruin, meticulously dismantling his life, one desperate, self-inflicted blow at a time. The delicious irony of it all was that in trying to escape the truth, Axel was merely digging himself deeper, proving my words and his true nature to everyone who had once believed his polished facade. My revenge wasn't a fiery explosion, it was a slow, inevitable implosion, orchestrated by the man himself. The clink of cutlery against porcelain, the soft murmur of conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter formed a comforting symphony in the chic restaurant. We were celebrating, James and I, along with a few trusted colleagues, a major campaign win that had solidified my firm's reputation and my own. The evening air was crisp with success, tasting of fine wine and well-deserved satisfaction. I felt completely present, fully immersed in the warmth of good company and genuine achievement. James, seated across from me, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he listened to a colleague's anecdote, epitomized the kind of steady, respectful presence I now sought in my life. Then, the symphony faltered. A commotion at the entrance, a voice a little too loud, a presence a little too aggressive for the refined setting. My stomach tightened, a familiar chill creeping up my spine before I even turned. I didn't need to see him. I recognized the discordant energy instantly. Axel. He swayed slightly, his expensive suit looking rumpled, his hair disheveled, a half-empty glass of amber liquid clutched precariously in his hand. His eyes, bleary yet focused with a terrifying intensity, scanned the room before locking onto our table. Behind him, looking utterly mortified, were Juanita and Carmen, escorted by a stressed-looking maitre d'. Axel dismissed them with a dismissive wave, pulling free and stumbling towards us. "Veronica," he slurred, his voice carrying far too easily across the linen-draped tables. "There you are. I knew I'd find you." My colleagues exchanged uneasy glances, their celebratory mood evaporating. James, ever perceptive, placed a reassuring hand on my arm, his gaze firm, protective. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Axel reached our table, slamming his glass down, spilling some of its contents. "We need to talk," he declared, ignoring my colleagues and focusing solely on me. "About us. This whole mess. I've been thinking, Veronica. Really thinking. And I realize I've been an absolute fool." Juanita, looking pale, tried to intervene. "Axel. Darling. Not now. Let's go home." Carmen, her face a mask of shame and anger, simply shook her head, unable to meet my eyes. But Axel was on a roll, fueled by liquor and a desperate, misguided attempt to reclaim his narrative. "No, Mother. It's time. Veronica needs to hear this. Everyone needs to hear this." He swept his gaze across my colleagues, then back to me, trying to muster a charming, penitent smile that came out as a grotesque grimace. "I messed up, Vero. I was under so much pressure, so much stress. And I said things. Terrible things. But you know I didn't mean it. You know I love you." He tried to reach for my hand, but I subtly pulled it back, my expression unwavering. "We had 5 years, Veronica. 5 years. That means something. I want to apologize. Properly. In front of everyone. I want to make things right. Come back to me, Vero. Please. I miss you. I miss times us asterisk." The restaurant had gone silent. Every eye was on our table, witnessing Axel's public spectacle. My colleagues looked at me, unsure how to react. Juanita and Carmen stood frozen, caught between wanting to vanish and wanting to silence him. I waited. I let his words hang in the air, pathetic and self-serving. Then, I met his gaze, my voice calm, clear, and cutting through the silence like a finely honed blade. "Axel," I began, my tone perfectly even. "I appreciate your attempt at an apology, though I suspect it's less about genuine remorse and more about salvaging what little dignity you perceive yourself to have left. But since you insist on making this a public affair, let's ensure the full Times truth is heard, shall we?" I turned slightly, addressing the silent audience, my colleagues, Axel's family, and the curious diners with a quiet, composed demeanor. 3 months ago, Axel stood on a stage, at our engagement party. Surrounded by friends and family, he didn't just break off our engagement, he systematically dismantled my self-worth, piece by painful piece. I met Axel's widening, now slightly sobered eyes. "You said, and I quote, 'I'm just not sure I can go through with it. I mean, look at her. Veronica. You've let yourself go, haven't you? You're not the girl I fell in love with. The sparkle's gone. The Times appeal asterisk.'" My voice remained soft, yet each recalled word landed with the force of a hammer blow. "You then clarified. Marriage is a serious commitment, and frankly, I deserve someone who takes care of herself. Someone who inspires me." A collective gasp swept through the room. My colleagues, their faces pale with shock, glanced from me to Axel. Juanita clutched her chest, her eyes wide with horror, a slow realization dawning on her face. Carmen openly glared at her brother, her earlier shame replaced by pure indignation. "You weren't lashing out, Axel," I continued, my gaze fixed on him. "You were expressing your unfiltered contempt. You publicly humiliated me. Not because of stress, but because that is who you are. You believed I was a possession you could discard. A reflection of your own inadequacy. Unworthy of your inspiration." I leaned forward slightly, my voice dropping to a near whisper, yet potent enough to be heard in the hushed room. "And now you come here, intoxicated and desperate, hoping to sweep away 5 years of calculated manipulation and one unforgettable act of cruelty with a performative apology? Do you honestly believe I, or anyone with an ounce of self-respect, would ever forget that?" Axel's face, which had cycled through shock, defiance, and a fleeting terror, now settled into a mask of pure, unadulterated mortification. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His chest heaved, his bravado utterly evaporated, replaced by the crushing weight of public exposure. He looked around wildly, seeing only condemnation in the faces of the diners, the disgust in his mother's eyes, the anger in his sister's. My colleagues, now fully understanding the depth of his past actions, offered me quiet, supportive nods. James's grip tightened on my arm, a silent message of solidarity. "There is no us to miss, Axel," I concluded, rising gracefully from my seat. "There never truly was. You broke it beyond repair, but in doing so, you gave me the greatest gift. The freedom to become the woman you claimed I wasn't. The woman who Times deserves Times respect, who Times inspires Times herself, and for that I am truly grateful." With a final, unwavering look, I turned my back on him. James immediately stood, offering a comforting presence. Juanita, her face streaked with tears, rushed to Axel, but not to comfort him. Her words, though hushed, reached us. "How Times could Times you, Axel? How could you ever treat anyone like that? Your own mother is ashamed." Carmen, shaking her head in disgust, walked away from her brother, straight towards me, her eyes filled with an unspoken apology and newfound respect. Axel stood alone, his shoulders slumped, his apology having achieved the exact opposite of his intention. He had come to reclaim his narrative, but instead, I had written his true ending, for all to see. The fairy tale was over, and the villain was finally unmasked, not by a hero, but by the strength of the woman he had tried to destroy. The silence that followed my words in the restaurant was short-lived, quickly replaced by a furious hum of gossip that spread like wildfire through the city's elite social and professional circles. By the next morning, the carefully crafted illusion of Axel Landon, the charming, ambitious, and respectable heir, had not just cracked. It had disintegrated into dust. My phone, once filled with Axel's desperate pleas, now chimed with messages from colleagues and acquaintances, not of pity, but of admiration and shared outrage. The details of his public humiliation of me, once whispered and dismissed, were now undeniable, laid bare by his own drunken confession and my unyielding truth. Professionally, the consequences were swift and brutal. Axel's clients, many of whom were present that night or heard the story from trusted sources, began to quietly withdraw their accounts. The major project he had been spearheading, already teetering, collapsed entirely, dragging down his reputation with it. Stories of his volatile temper and unprofessional conduct, previously brushed under the carpet, now surfaced with alarming regularity. He was no longer seen as a charismatic, if difficult figure, but as a narcissistic liability, a ticking time bomb. Within weeks, the once sought-after executive found himself sidelined, then subtly pushed out of his position. His social standing, so integral to his self-worth, evaporated. Invitations stopped coming, calls went unreturned, and his network, once so vast, withered to nothing. Easton and Miles, his loyal friends, finally abandoned ship, unable to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the exposed bully, or simply unwilling to tarnish their own reputations by association. The most profound impact, however, was within his own family. Juanita's initial horror at the restaurant had solidified into a chilling disappointment. She saw for the first time, without the rose-tinted glasses of maternal love, the true depth of his selfishness. Her calls to me ceased, replaced by hushed conversations with Carmen. Carmen, already primed by my subtle cues, felt a profound sense of vindication mixed with deep sadness for her brother. I heard through mutual channels that Axel had tried to reconcile, to spin another elaborate tale of victimhood. But his mother and sister, armed with the undeniable truth of his actions, refused to listen. Their loyalty, once absolute, had shattered. They couldn't disown him completely, but they certainly disavowed his character, leaving him adrift without the one support system he had always taken for granted. Axel was left isolated, stripped bare of his professional standing, his social circle, and most devastatingly for him, the adoration of his family. His meticulously constructed ego, inflated by years of unchallenged grandiosity, lay in ruins. He was not just alone. He was exposed, unable to hide from the grotesque reflection of himself that he had tirelessly presented to the world. There was no one left to charm, no one left to manipulate, no one left to impress. He was a king without a kingdom, a performer without an audience, left to face the harsh, unvarnished consequences of his own choices. For me, the aftermath was not a triumphant roar, but a quiet, profound sense of peace. There was no bitterness, no lingering desire for his continued suffering. The act of exposing him, of allowing the truth to surface, had purged the last vestiges of venom from my system. My revenge wasn't about him at all. It was about me. It was about reclaiming my narrative, validating my pain, and ensuring that no one else would suffer under his delusion. Standing on the precipice of this new chapter, I felt lighter, unburdened by the weight of the past. Justice had been served, not through my active malice, but by the relentless, inevitable revelation of truth. I had not destroyed Axel. He had, with meticulous precision, destroyed himself. And I, Veronica Leo, was finally truly free. The quiet satisfaction that followed Axel's final, public unraveling was not an end, but a clean slate, a silent invitation to fill the expansive void with something genuinely meaningful. And so, I did. My professional life, already a robust testament to my capabilities, surged forward with an almost unstoppable momentum. The Hope for Tomorrow gala incident, far from being a liability, had unexpectedly amplified my reputation. My firm, already impressed by my strategic acumen, now saw me as a woman of unwavering integrity and formidable resilience. Clients, drawn by whispers of my intelligence and grace under pressure, sought me out, eager to have my expertise guide their own narratives. I wasn't merely a PR manager, I was a brand in myself, synonymous with strength, clarity, and an almost alchemical ability to transform adversity into advantage. Promotions followed swiftly, each new title bringing with it increased responsibility, greater challenges, and the profound satisfaction of knowing I had earned every single one, not through charm or manipulation, but through sheer merit. My calendar remained packed. But now, each appointment, each negotiation, each successful pitch, felt like a deliberate stroke in the masterpiece of my own making, painted with purpose and passion. Amidst this exhilarating professional ascent, a new, unexpected thread began to weave itself into the fabric of my life. James Morrison. He had been there, a steady, perceptive presence throughout the climax at the restaurant, his hand a silent anchor on my arm. In the days and weeks that followed, while I navigated the professional fallout of Axel's implosion, James was a quiet, unassuming source of support. He didn't offer pity or unsolicited advice, but rather, a listening ear, a shared laugh over a particularly absurd client email, or an insightful comment that showed he truly understood the complexities of my work and my journey. Our conversations, initially confined to project strategies and market analyses, began to drift into more personal territory. We'd grab coffee between meetings, or stay late discussing industry trends that subtly veered into life philosophies. I found myself looking forward to his insights, to the way his eyes would crinkle at the corners when he smiled, to the quiet strength that radiated from him without any need for grand displays. What struck me most about James, especially when contrasted with the ghost of Axel, was the profound ease and respect that permeated our interactions. There was no love bombing, no manipulative compliments designed to chip away at my self-worth before rushing in to save me. James saw me, Veronica Leo, exactly as I was, a woman of ambition, intelligence, and a fiercely independent spirit. He celebrated my successes without a hint of envy and offered genuine constructive feedback when I faced challenges. He wasn't threatened by my strength, he was drawn to it, admired it. He asked about my therapy, not with judgment, but with an open curiosity, genuinely wanting to understand my growth. Our dates, which evolved organically from our shared professional life, were simple yet profoundly meaningful. Quiet dinners where we'd debate current events, long walks where we'd talk about our dreams, or evenings spent simply enjoying each other's company, comfortable in shared silence. With James, I never felt the need to perform, to be less than myself, or to fit into some preconceived notion of what a girlfriend should be. He didn't want a moon to reflect his light, he wanted a sun to shine alongside his. The lessons I had learned, forged in the crucible of betrayal and self-discovery, found their ultimate validation in my relationship with James. True love, I realized, wasn't about being completed by another person, but about two whole individuals choosing to walk together, enriching each other's lives. It was built on trust, on open communication, on mutual admiration, and on the unshakable belief in each other's inherent worth. James taught me what reciprocal love truly felt like. A steady, gentle current that lifted both of us, rather than a turbulent storm designed to drown one. I finally understood that healthy boundaries weren't about pushing people away, but about inviting the right people in, those who respected the lines you drew for your own peace and well-being. My journey had been about reclaiming my narrative. And with James, I wasn't just writing a new chapter. I was discovering the true meaning of a happily ever after, one I defined entirely on my own terms, filled with genuine connection, unwavering respect, and a love that felt as expansive and limitless as the future itself. The happily ever after I'd always dreamed of, once a distant fantasy tied to a specific man, had finally materialized, not as a static destination, but as an ongoing journey of self-discovery and genuine connection. Looking back, it felt as though an entire lifetime had unfolded within those few tumultuous months. The naive girl who clung to storybook romances, who allowed her self-worth to be dictated by a prince's fickle gaze, was now a distant echo. In her place stood a woman forged in fire, stripped bare of illusions, yet radiating an inner light far brighter than any borrowed sparkle. The transformation wasn't merely cosmetic. It was a profound seismic shift, recalibrating the very core of my being. I had learned that true strength wasn't about enduring pain silently, but about confronting it, dissecting it, and then meticulously rebuilding a stronger, more authentic self from the fragments. My journey had been a brutal, beautiful lesson in self-love and resilience. I had once believed that love was about sacrifice, about molding myself to fit another's expectations. Now, I understood that self-love was the bedrock upon which all other healthy relationships could be built. It wasn't selfish. It was essential. It meant honoring my own needs, protecting my peace, and cherishing the woman I had painstakingly become. Resilience, I discovered, wasn't the absence of brokenness, but the fierce determination to pick up the pieces, to learn from the damage, and to emerge not just healed, but fortified. The scars remained, faint reminders of where I had been wounded, but they were no longer symbols of shame. They were badges of survival, proof of an unyielding spirit that refused to be extinguished. Crucially, I had mastered the art of setting boundaries, not as walls to keep people out, but as clear, luminous lines that defined my space, my values, and my non-negotiables. Axel had taught me, in the cruelest way possible, what it felt like to have those boundaries trampled, to have my very essence disregarded. James, in his quiet, unwavering respect, showed me the profound beauty of a relationship built on mutual recognition and care. It was in these healthy interactions that I truly understood the power of discerning who belonged in my life and who didn't. The fear of being alone, once a powerful motivator for accepting less than I deserved, had vanished, replaced by the serene confidence that my own company was more than enough and that any connection I welcomed into my world would only enhance, never diminish, my inherent completeness. The road ahead stretched wide and inviting, no longer shadowed by the ghosts of past hurts or the narrow confines of someone else's expectations. I embraced the unwritten chapters with an exhilarating sense of freedom. My professional aspirations continued to soar, fueled by a renewed passion and an unwavering commitment to excellence. I sought out new challenges, not as a means to prove myself to anyone, but because I reveled in the process of growth, of continuous learning and expansion. The past, with all its pain and its lessons, was now a foundation, not a prison. It had shaped me, refined me, but it no longer defined me. My story wasn't about the man who broke my heart. It was about the woman who bravely pieced it back together, far stronger and more luminous than before. My voice, once timid and apologetic, now resonated with conviction. My journey, from naive believer in fairy tales to an empowered, self-assured woman, was a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. It was a reminder that even when your world shatters, you hold the power to gather the shards, to sculpt them into something breathtakingly new. I was Veronica Leo, no longer waiting for a hero, no longer seeking validation. I was the author of my own narrative, writing each powerful, purposeful word with my own hand, creating a life filled with genuine love, unwavering respect, and an authentic, unbounded joy that was entirely, gloriously, my own.